here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week it's going to be the turn of Michael Jung, who I spoke to very recently to find out more about life, love, poetry and all that other groovy stuff. Has been active in music all his life and was in Alice Donut and probably still is. So this is the interview. So after several minutes of interesting but casual chat, we get down to the exciting subject of the early formative years. Michael, it's over to you.
Well, my first album was a British band by the name of the Beatles.
Oh, yes.
Heard of them. Yes, I remember going to Sam Goody's on 6th Avenue in Manhattan and buying it because I was, listening to them on the radio. I was like, I got to get a record. And then my parents promptly took us to Korea, where my father is from. So I spent an entire summer not being able to listen to the Beatles, and I remember that quite vividly, not having the opportunity to listen to the Beatles because we didn't have Walkman back then. We didn't have,
nothing.
iPods, certainly nothing. So completely removed from all music for an entire summer. Well, not an entire summer, but a big section of it. But generally, I come from classic rock kind of stuff, including David Bowie. But I went to a high school that was suburban U.S. high school. It was very, I guess, heavy metal oriented,
right?
I would say. So, like early on in my high school career or schooling, was bands like Led Zeppelin, AC/DC, things like that. And I got into kind of proggy stuff like Yes and Rush soon after that.
Yes.
And then the Clash came around. Clash and Elvis Costello and quote unquote new wave. Kind of missed out on the Sex Pistols, that whole thing for some reason.
Yes.
Didn't really get into punk till like in the middle of college, perhaps, when I discovered Crass.
Classic.
And, yeah.
So were your parents at all musical? Did they have any sort of musical kind of lean-ins?
Well, my mother's family did, basically. And she played piano. She had she had learned as a young woman and played a few pieces, so there was a piano.
Yes.
But that's pretty much it. Just kind of her sister played as well.
Yeah.
As far as my musical genesis, definitely one of the first things I was really focused on was Jesus Christ Superstar, which is a musical.
Yes.
Are you familiar with that?
Well, very, and it was kind of interesting because I was going to say, because Ian Gillan, I believe, is kind of on the first soundtrack, and he obviously is in Deep Purple. And if you listen to that vocal, you think, oh, it all makes sense, doesn't it? Because he does have a very strong voice.
It was great.
And also, I mean, those songs, I loved them when I heard them when I was about 10, 11. And occasionally I kind of hear the odd one now. And it still is like, they have good power chords and very kind of anthemic kind of choruses. It's and when you hear Ian Gillan and stuff, and I quite liked some dramatic it was very dramatic kind of rock, I suppose, a bit like Meatloaf really at times, or even Bruce Springsteen. There is a lot of kind of story. Obviously it's a biblical story, but it has love, life, betrayal. I mean, it has it all, doesn't it? Well, it's the story.
Definitely biblical.
I know. Check me out. They call me Sherlock. Anyway. So yes. So yes, Ian Gillan's a famous man who split. But a lot of those early, especially in the 60s, the late 60s, a lot of people who were into. There was a production of Hair. The sort of the dawning of the age of Aquarius. I mean, some of the cast in that game went on to bands and, were into sort of, good, they train people to become very good musicians and singers, and they also train people how to cope with playing, once, twice a day for months on end, and you had to sort of learn how to navigate that world that is showbiz, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, after Jesus Christ Superstar, like, show tunes, etc., like theater, like completely lost to me until experimental stuff in college.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
did you have
hair,
any?
No.
You said goodbye to hair, didn't you? You weren't going to do hair, were you?
Yeah, I was actually in a production of Hair in college, but
excellent.
not a big fan.
No, but you got to see some nudity. Was there nudity at that time?
It was a college production. There could have been. I don't know.
I don't know. Anyway, that's fine. So when did you suddenly find yourself thinking, look, because I'm just one of those people who look back and think, I never really wanted to play an instrument. I just was obsessed with listening to music. What made you suddenly...
That's great.
What? Yeah, kind of. Lots of regrets. But then sometimes you think, well, perhaps that was a lucky miss. But when did a musical instrument come into your life?
Well, after Jesus Christ Superstar, I begged my parents for piano lessons, because I just went to the piano and picked up bang, 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 bang. And I was like, gotta learn more.
Yeah.
So I took piano lessons for a few years until I have to give credit to Dreamboat Annie, I think, for finally inspiring me to pick up a guitar.
This is
not sure why it was that particular album.
Well, Dreamboat Annie had the song "Crazy on You," didn't it? Right. And it is one of the most amazingly exciting songs, because it was around that time I wouldn't say I discovered them, but there was like Blue Oyster Cult, Heart, and I don't know, probably Frampton Comes Live. There was a lot of classic rock at that stage, wasn't there? And there were certain songs that people would say, just listen to this, Crazy on You by Heart. And you went, wow. And you loved the rest of the album, but that was the one song that stood out, a bit like Don't Fear the Reaper. It's like, oh, Jesus, that's amazing. Talking of Jesus.
That's a good example.
They're just great songs, and you kind of think, were they great songs because we were young at the time, or just great songs? But I think if you heard it now, it might sound a bit dated, but my God, it still rocks.
Definitely.
So what was it about Dreamboat Annie that you particularly liked?
Nothing, I guess, just the goosebumps. All of a sudden there were goosebumps. I'm like, yes. I understood, the thrill of rock, and in particular just doing it. Whoever was in the room with me was like going to be in the band.
Yes. So when did you when did you get a guitar?
Guess around 13, 14.
So is that the case then? Because you mentioned at the beginning, well, you commented, were you born 64?
I was.
Right. So yes, I'm just doing the maths here. So when you were 14, okay. So that was, you were definitely too young for punk, really, unless you had a very cool older brother or your dad was in a punk band.
Right.
You were just never going to get there, were you? So we were the generation that slightly missed punk, but we were right there for the world that was post-punk.
And I missed being a fucking hippie too, unfortunately, which I really wanted to be.
Yeah, completely missed that one.
It's too late for being a hippie, too early to be a punk. So.
Yes.
But not just right for being a Zeppelin head, which is good.
Yeah. Well, I had an older brother, 7 years older than me, and he was at that period in the 70s where he loved, Genesis, Wishbone Ash, Barclay James Harvest, with Black Sabbath and Deep Purple thrown in. So I became quite obsessed with that kind of, during about 5 years of my life, I think. Those albums and those bands were sort of everything, and I suppose that's where I got Dreamboat Annie and Heart and, Frampton Comes Live. Everyone had Frampton Comes Live. It kind of came with, I don't know, when you got your birth certificate, you just kind of got a copy of that as well.
Such a great gatefold, right? It just opened up. He was there, so bigger than life.
Yes, he kind of it was a pretty tricky one, really, wasn't it? Because it's such a sort of, I mean, in a way, it's kind of a classic album, but at the same time, you don't, when you listen to it now, you don't quite know why it sold quite so many billions. Because frankly, it's not that amazing. I know that sounds sacrilege, but you know, if you actually went to listen to it,
Well,
now,
I mean, you want to talk about the music industry now? Because like all the albums that sold so many much better albums went by the wayside.
yes, absolutely.
That's just the way things go. So wait, I have to. Is Frampton Comes Alive the one with the gatefold?
Yeah.
Or is that? It is the one.
And the slightly
just
purple,
like him,
I think the purple kind of light behind him, and it has that cool guy who announced it, you know, I don't know what city it was now, but he sort of mumbles this brilliant intro and it all sounds very cool. When you're in the UK, like I was in the 70s, and you hear an American vocal being cool, you just think, wow, that sounds fantastic. They must all be cool in America. And then
I think it went the other way around as well. I mean, there's so many like American bands that like have British accents because they're just so influenced by British music.
Yes,
it's funny.
So we had the punk period, then post-punk with people like, you know, Public Image Limited and the Nightingales Gang of Four, and then sort of this is a critical period of life now. 83 for me, you know, we'd had Thatcher in sort of 79, you know, Margaret Thatcher. There'd been the Falkland War, the miners' strike, and then indie pop sort of appeared in a way when the Smiths appeared with that first single. And Morrissey, Marr, they just sort of captured a moment for 5 years. That was basically their lifespan before they broke up. And things kind of in this country really changed because there was so much unemployment. I think most people just said, well, I might as well take drugs, get drunk and be in a band if you can. And because unemployment benefit was kind of relatively easy to get, it was the sort of birth of a lot.
On and on.
It was just very easy to sort of do it. And at that time, there was, I mentioned earlier, the gatekeepers. We had John Peel, who was on Radio 1 4 nights a week, so he had a big coverage.
Oh, yeah.
You had the NME Melody Maker Sounds record, something Mirror, kind of weeklies as well, which had huge circulations of like 100,000. And every city and town in the UK had an alternative indie night. And as you know, the UK is tiny. You can drive from one end to the other. So, you know, bands could easily start playing, you know, to quite good audiences of, 200 people who had, who hadn't seen the sun for ages. Skinny white kids, basically. So, because for £2.50, you'd often have 3 bands on. And that was kind of, at the time, you thought that was just like fine. Now you look back with great rose-tinted sunglasses and think, God, I wish I'd done it more, but there you go. So what was the 80s like for you as we turned 18, say, or 16?
I guess a little, like I was kind of looking around for people to play with, and whatever band I thought was pretty good, I would play with. I think where I was at the time was kind of new wavy, you know, sort of like a very spandexy kind of thing. Sort of like maybe a little towards U2 as well. Like that was kind of when MTV started up, and I kind of liked any band that was playing live, like on MTV, like the Buggles. Like I was like, why are they not playing? You know, they're playing, but like, why are they having pictures of other stuff? You know, I was totally into just watching bands play.
Yes.
And you know, just sort of sitting around, like Joy Division was huge for me at that time. So I guess I was kind of on the goth side. Definitely wore all black.
Yes.
So
nice.
Yeah, but it's just sort of like whatever was around. Didn't really feel like it was part of any particular scene or anything like that.
Did you find music was quite tribal at that stage? Because in this country, there was, especially that period of the 80s, there was the mainstream charts that had that Trevor Horn production sound with ABC, and there was Duran Duran, Spandau Ballet, and then you had the cool sound of Sade, and you know, Phil Collins was kind of everywhere. You know, you couldn't even go to the toilet without Phil Collins sort of coming out the, you know, lavatory. I mean, he was just all over the place, wasn't he, with Genesis? But then you had, on the other side, you had all these kind of, I suppose, left of centre politically, all these kind of bands who felt disenfranchised, and obviously the Smiths being one, but there were other bands, obviously these are from Australia, like the Go-Betweens and the Triffids and the Chills from New Zealand, and then you had all these other very small bands like the June Brides and Yeah Yeah No, Jesus and the Mary Chain had started, the Membranes, the Wedding Present. You know, I won't keep going on, that's quite tedious really, but you know, there was a very big...
I'm on my hand, I'm counting the ones that I've heard of.
Sorry. But you know, all those kind of little bands that, you know, were, I suppose, were small in this country. God knows they must have been tiny in America. I just wondered what it was, and it was very tribal. You didn't sort of go and go, oh, I quite like Duran Duran. Well, you didn't publicly and say that at the time. If you liked the Smiths, because it just felt
I guess there's like a filter of some sort that of music that got here. For me, I didn't feel it was trouble at all. But I was like in my own little thing. I was not tribal because I like ABC and Killing Joke. So whatever, or the SOS band, so like my tastes were whatever was good and whatever my friends listened to, and that was pretty varied. Then there was like an REM-ish kind of. I was in New Haven at the time, New Haven, Connecticut, and it was very like REM-ish kind of feel to that town at the time. But yeah, I didn't find it was tribal. But I could be completely wrong. It wasn't tribal to me, and nobody, put me down for listening to ABC or like put their fingers in their ears, played Killing Joke, or would kind of, or would get sad at, or how would you react to Joy Division?
Yeah,
if you were a pop kid, just sort of like, oh, whatever. Well, there was no like looking down on other people's music.
That's much more mature than we were. I think we, because I was always a bit, with Brandon Flowers from the Killers. He often talks about a lot of these British bands, and most of them are quite cool. And then he mentions a few which you think, oh dear, you wouldn't normally have omitted, you like Duran Duran with those other bands. But then I realised that we're English and very, small and uptight at the best of times. And yes, other people can just kind of enjoy the work of other bands without it being a problem. But I mean, bands like, I suppose Depeche Mode is one of those ones where at the time I was like, oh, that's new romantic. I hate new romantic music. Now I look back and think, oh, actually they're quite good, and so Soft Cell. But at the time it was like, no, they're new romantic, and they're just a London band who are just kind of, they're just loving life too much. I want more misery and pain. Sorry, you just.
Well, I used to not like XTC at all. I didn't understand that because the couple songs were like so radio heavy and radio friendly that I just like, as you go on in life, you understand that more of like the craft and less of the pop aesthetic of something like that. So, and goes back and forth, even, disco, when I was in high school, you couldn't, that was the war in high school. But then like later on in life, you like, not just for the, with the resurgence kind of it, or like, with the 80s are cool last year, that kind of thing. But some music that you just rejected out of hand, later on you see the value in.
Oh, totally, absolutely. No, I mean, I think we've all done that with age. There's more. I mean, well, if you fast forward just a few more years from the 80s, I mean, there was a really big thing when Sonic Youth was signing to a major after being on SST Records, and I remember that was just something that rumbled on, and it was like, they can't possibly sign for a major. And in this country, there was an importance with bands signing to an independent label, even if it was a rubbish label, and they were still run by vaguely crooks who still ripped the band off. That seemed better than signing for a major which might have just been just as bad, but we, in our minds...
Well, until somebody offered them a major label contract, then it was okay.
Then it was okay. Or the Clash did the classic thing of sort of signing with Columbia and then moaned about it, and it's like, well, don't sign. You shouldn't have signed, really, mate. I can't get that worked up about.
Yeah.
But anyway, so how did you?
I can't talk about that. I don't understand that lifestyle, or like it's a different world. Like back to Led Zeppelin, like Jimmy Page and Robert Plant never lived in the real world. They don't deal with like things that normal people deal with, and so their life is completely different from ours. And sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, but you can't say, look at you, you've got it all made, so you can't complain about anything.
Yes, this is true.
And certainly, like the Clash signed a record label, they didn't know exactly what they were getting into, and maybe they just like to complain. That's the kind of people they are. So
I don't know.
It's hard to say what side of that.
We'll never judge anyone, not here anyway. But
truth.
But then, how did you find yourself being signed? Not signed. How did you find yourself becoming part of the band? That's the $1 million question.
Oh, well, back in that day, it was all Village Voice. If you wanted to play with somebody, you had to go through the Village Voice and see who's looking for this, who's looking for that. And, some people were like hanging out all the time. I was not hanging out all the time. I actually had a job and, was young and was more interested in playing than going to see bands so much.
Right.
So I would go to a few shows, but I wasn't like on the scene. You know what I mean? Like to hook up with other musicians.
So were you in New York during that period, by the way?
Yeah, I came here in 85.
85. So what was the scene like at then? Because I've done a lot of interviews with people who were around, I suppose, in the late 70s, like Richard Lloyd, and then members of a band called the Rockettes, who were a rockabilly band, who were very exciting, and then various other... I think a guy called Oxbow. But things changed a lot.
Eugene? You talked to Eugene?
Yeah, is that Oxbow?
Yeah.
God, yeah, gee, that is a classic interview.
Robinson.
Yes, I mean, he is quite something. And there's a woman called Anne Magnuson and Joey Aria. Yep. I think he's a drag queen, so not so much. But then, yes, so the thing that I got from all those kind of people that I've interviewed from New York was that heroin was just everywhere, wasn't it? And it just wiped the sort of place out. So when you were there in 85, that must have felt like a different chapter at that stage, because most of the people were either dead or in rehab and had lost the way. So what was it like in 85 for you?
Well, let's see. It's hard to say. I mean, it's kind of like a little disjointed. As far as the New York scene, I think that's kind of like Heartbreakers, where that was their sort of like, they were sprouting out of, the ashes of, those bands,
dear old Johnny Thunders,
stuff like that. Yeah.
And obviously there'd been CBGBs and the Mud Club and Max's Kansas City, and I suppose Studio 54. So was that? Because I can't remember when these places finished. I think they were still going. So did you sort of go and frequent them a lot?
I was mostly playing. I have to admit that I didn't go out as much as I do now. As you were saying, like, you realize, like, what was on offer that you, like, took for granted at the time. But back then it was pretty disjointed, like the actual, like, true alternative was just coming about at that point, and there were a lot of good bands. I mean, the early CBGB's scene was not defined stylistically, for sure. I mean, that was like the great thing about it, and that tradition continued into the 80s. Like, all the bands were different. one band that pops into my mind right now is Throwing Muses,
Right.
that were around at that time, but there was still sort of like a or still punk. I wouldn't call it post-punk yet, but at that point post-punk and alternative were developing sort of, and I guess that's probably just two different names or more of basically the same thing. But New York is really a melting pot, always has been. I think the post-Dolls scene was probably the most insular of the scenes. Like, those people kind of didn't have much patience for other music, but that's probably because they hung out with each other so much.
Yeah.
Whereas I would play with different kinds of bands, but not go out so much, or not.
Got you.
Not go to one particular club. And then there was No Wave at the time. Arto Lindsay was like, one of the first acts I saw when I came to New York. And that right blew my mind.
Yes, and I can't remember what the record label was that a lot of those people. I know Brian Eno worked on it as well, but oh my God, I think we're having another call coming in. No, so that's the famous Skype number. So then, yes, so you got yourself So were the band looking for a guitar replacement at this stage?
Yeah, well, actually, the Alice Donut sprang out from like a band called the Sea Beasts that was a bunch of guys from Columbia University, sort of their band. So the first Alice Donut album is made largely of that material that came out of the Sea Beasts.
Yes.
And at the time that I joined the band, one of the members, the member I replaced, was kind of like, he liked playing, but it wasn't his thing. He had his own kind of band that he wanted to go in a completely different direction. So, and not that he didn't have a good time playing, he says it was a great time. But anyway, so they were looking for a guitar player. And that was it. Like, Village Voice, I went to see them at Tramps, like the old Tramps, when it was on 23rd. I forgot. Anyway. And I was like, hey, not a bad band. So I met them, and I think 2 weeks later, we had our first show at CBGB's.
So it clicked very quickly.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I always have this little spat with the drummer, Steven, because he joined the band around that time too, but he joined a few months before I did. So for some reason, he thinks that he's an original member, but I am not. And I'm not, because they played like 3 or 4 shows,
right,
without me. So
yes,
I guess it was Alice done it. Yes, because they did have the name before I joined the band.
Yes. So you worked on that the sort of the first kind of commercial release. This is the one, Donut Comes Alive.
Yes.
And this is on the Jello. Yes, that's a nice one. This is on Jello Biafra's Alternative Tentacles label as well.
Yeah, that's right.
So what was the process like of putting that together? Had you been, once you started, were you quite a solid unit who's just started, rehearsing?
Oh my God, yeah. When we first started playing, we would rehearse and just go oh my God, we're so great. It was a lot of fun. When you think your band is great, it's like the best.
Yes, absolutely. So at that stage, because you said you'd also got a job, were you having to sort of juggle various commitments at once?
Yeah, well, see, I had a day job, which is fine because you practice at night or whatever. But it wasn't like a real conflict or anything because I didn't do heroin. So I had that going for me.
That's good.
And I was young, so a job and being in a band, no problem.
Yes, excellent. And when you went in the studio, did you have all the material already kind of rehearsed and sort of finely tuned. A bit like, I'm always thinking of the Black Sabbath first album, where they'd been playing it for years and they just went in and just banged it out in an afternoon and said, "That's it, mate. That's a classic album." I just wondered if you had a similar process or experience.
Pretty much. I mean, we had been playing it for years, but the first album was mostly written, during the Sea Beasts time, which was like the year before. So, I mean, these days, people have like 3 or 4 years between albums. It's like a longer timeline than it used to be. Like the whole Beatles, catalog was within 5 or 6 years, something like that.
Yes.
So it was kind of like that. So the first album was kind of stewing for a little bit, but it stewed differently once I joined the band, and then they were already in negotiations with Jello at that time. So and we would release a record once a year-ish.
Yeah.
And the first album was it stewed for 2 years instead of 1 year.
So because most bands who I've done interviews with, there's a bit of a 5-year narrative, especially in the UK. They get together, the first 12 months, honeymoon period, everything's going well. They get a single, John Peel plays it. They get a John Peel session, which is fantastic for them. They get a few gigs around the country, which is all very nice because there's lots of alternative indie nights. They get a bit of press in the NME and stuff like that, and Melody Maker. So the first album, generally good. Honeymoon period, in fact. Then it's that tricky second album. But with you, I mean, and the band, it is kind of it's almost for the first 4 years, it's kind of an album a year or 5 albums on a sort of quite a major label. So who produced your first, or who produced most of those albums?
Well, we did the first 2 at Water Music,
right?
Which is a very large concern now in the New York area. I think they're still around. There was a questionable time whether they would survive. I'm not sure if they have, but after us, like a lot of really big people recorded Water Music because they kind of grew into like a big studio.
Yes.
We were like at the old Water Music, which had like power lines next to it, so you had 60 cycle hum everywhere. Not everywhere, but it was done at Water Music, the first 2.
Nice. And
the first one was with Robert. Oh my God, I'm spacing on his last name right now. Anyway, if I think of it, I'll say it. But or if I have the album sitting around, actually still have vinyl, I could look at it.
Oh yes, that's good. Yes. So I
think they're behind keyboards now. A stack of keyboards.
Nice. So did your playing and sort of contribution to the band change much over those first few years?
Oh yeah, Stone is a unique band, so my playing completely changed. Like I was kind of like a thoughtful guitar player before that, and I would I'd be like the bass player. I would like kind of like just be playing guitar. That's what I did. I'd sit there and kind of like play these cool parts or whatever. But when I joined Stone, there was everybody's like jumping around, having a good time. It's like much more kinetic music than I'd played before, so that changed me a lot.
Yes, absolutely. Did you find you quickly picked up an audience as well?
Grew very steadily throughout our entire career.
Yes.
So, and we were doing. I guess we didn't even realize how well we were doing because we weren't making any money. And it was pre-internet. God, so long ago. So we didn't really understand like how many people knew about us, really. We toured the United States and we toured Europe, and people would always come out and see us, so we knew that people knew about us.
Yeah.
But to understand the kind of position we had, or like respect that we had from other musicians, or it's hard to tell from press always, but from other people, we kind of were starting to realize what our position was, just as we were basically breaking up.
Nice. It's all about time.
The first time we broke up, or whatever it was, like 1996. Really?
Yeah.
Wow. No way. Yeah.
So can you remember much about your first European, UK tour?
Yeah, that was great. Not specifics, but we always had a great time. And we played smaller clubs. We didn't do anything big at first, but no complaints. Europe was always better than the United States in terms of comfort we had at the venues. Like in the United States, you're kind of on your own.
Yes.
Sorry, you're going to hear the dog barking because my sons did not remember their keys to the house.
Nice. It's always the way, isn't it? Remember the keys. Anyway, are you? No, you're not.
Sorry. So.
Yes. No. I was just wondering because again, from the UK, the one thing I did notice, and I probably it's quite easily done, that you always get very excited by anything that's a long way away, and also when you're young, you're desperately trying hard to find the most obscure band in the world. So, and you kind of tick a lot of those kind of because you're on alternative Tentacles records. You're from America, New York. You make a great sound. You look good. So I could imagine you would have gone down very easily in the UK because of all those things before you had to do anything really.
Yeah, that's funny because like always in Europe is like from USA. That was a big thing. That's funny.
Yes,
people like that we've made the trip over. But I'm not sure what the attraction was.
Well, I would imagine. Yes, it's always that thing that you've discovered a new band. Did you ever do any John Peel sessions, or did that?
No, unfortunately, we never did.
That didn't quite happen, did it? What a shame. Yeah. Just such a shame. But
I would have liked to have known what he thought of the band.
Yeah, I hadn't. I can't from memory remember whether he ever played anything by the band or not. Actually, I
think I would have known if he had, because he's definitely like tastemaker at the top for sure.
He certainly was. Well, I do remember when he played that this Sub Pops, was it Sub Pop 100 compilation, and then we had those like the early years of Tad and the very first album by Nirvana, Bleach. So that was
right.
It all sounded. There was a sort of a movement, because going back to that kind of musical kind of those kind of episodes or chapters. Like between 83 to 87 was very much an indie time, and then sort of. The Smiths broke up. There were a lot of those bands who'd been going for 5 years had just had enough of each other and had realised they'd also made very little money. And then the next generation, the 16 to 18-year-olds came along, and there was, suddenly there was ecstasy, and there was a sort of more of a movement towards dance-related bands like the Happy Mondays, Soup Dragons, Primal Scream, but then also like the ambient stuff with the Orb and Orbital. But then we did have sort of the Seattle grunge scene come over, and there'd been bands like Sonic Youth and the Butthole Surfers. So you would have been sort of perfect timing really to have got that kind of publicity. Coming from the the USA and having the sound and the
definitely we definitely fit in with that whole scene. Like at that, when we first started going over, it was just as we and Fugazi start almost within a month of each other. Like we started out at the same time.
Yes.
So we kind of fit in with that, and other bands from Alternative Tentacles, No Means No, or Soul Side. Actually, it was not an Alternative Tentacles band, but Soul Side that Girls Against Boys came out of, things like that. that was a sort of scene. My memory's not as good as you. I can't remember all the bands that came out at the same time.
No, that's fair enough.
But
when you got to your, because obviously there's a honeymoon period, but then when you got to your fifth album, the Untidy Suicides of Your Degenerate Children, that came out in '92, but then there was quite a gap, isn't there, of 3 years before you do the Pure Acid Park album. What was the sort of vibe like in the band at that stage?
Everything was always great. I mean, there's actually a film that was made about the band, and I think the takeaway from that is that we definitely didn't have the VH1 arc of a band. We had fights, of course, like people being assholes, every once in a while.
Yes.
Nobody's an angel. We had fights, but basically, not a dysfunctional family. So we didn't have those kind of issues. Artistically, was there was so much creativity in the band that if you didn't want to work with Richard, you could work with Tom, or you could play around with Steve and then Sissy, or so many options that there was never any shortage of creative outlet in the band.
Yes, because the sound of the band changed. Well, and you kind of would expect it, but it does change, doesn't it, quite a bit over your kind of that creative arc.
It changes from album to album, I think.
Yes,
absolutely. It's not an intentional thing. We just we didn't think that we had a formula to write music. It was just everybody came from kind of a different part of the musical world.
Yes.
So whenever somebody had an idea, it was sort of either from a different part of the world or musical world, or it was bastardized by a different musical aesthetic.
Yes, I don't. Yeah, well, I mean, I was kind of, impressed with sort of the way that the band changed over the kind of course of those albums, and I also thought some of the arrangements were brilliant, and some of the sort of the vocal kind of. The vocals were good as well. I suppose.
Oh yeah, well, it totally defined the band. We all had fun playing music, but people like Tom's lyrics and his persona, whatever, and that's what made us a good live band as well. Is sort of that really put the band over the top.
Yes.
In mine, probably many people's assessment, I would think.
And what was it like playing the Reading Festival in '93?
Oh my God! You could see every one of 10,000 people's faces. You see these pictures of big crowds, and you're like, oh, that's great, big crowd. But when you're in front of a big crowd like that, you see every fucking person. It's so amazing. You could look in a different direction every second and see a different person. It was a lot of fun.
Yes. Did it? How does it feel once you've been sort of doing art centres, playing in front of a few hundred, to suddenly becoming a stadium band almost for just such a brief moment? I mean, when you're sort of backstage
for 45 minutes.
For 45 minutes, it's a good 45 minutes. But when you're backstage thinking you've got to go on, how do you sort of kind of get yourself and cope with that kind of moment?
Personally, I didn't have an issue with that. I mean, playing to 10,000 people and playing to 8 people, I never had a problem. Which is weird because, I came up when I first started playing the piano. I was learning classical music and just froze up if somebody else was in the room. Playing music was a huge burden, a psychic mind fuck. I had to, I was so nervous. Then when I started playing guitar, I never had that again. I guess I don't know if I got it out of my system or just understood, or maybe it had to do with the fact that I was playing stuff that I had actually created, so like I knew exactly what to do, and there was no possibility of making a mistake.
Yes, absolutely. Did you manage to, at that moment before the Reading one, to sort of take a moment to sort of, kind of take it in what was, because realising this was probably going to be like the equivalent of going to the moon for a moment, 45 minutes, rather than just saying, oh, who cares?
I felt that every night, no matter where we played, just like, this is fucking great. Even like, or like, Fabrik in Hamburg. It's like also like, it's not like playing at Reading Festival, but it's a nice big venue or whatever, or like the Underground in Camden. Not a huge venue, but always like exactly the same feeling. Like we're going to get to play our set, and it's always fun. And, it's not like 10,000 people's opinion is different from 100 people's opinion or reaction. If 10,000 people had booed us, that would have been pretty memorable.
Yes.
That would have been pretty awful.
That would have been just cruel. That would have been terrible. So so then what? Because you play the 1,000th show, which is a lot of shows you played actually, in London, 95, and then you kind of split in 96. Did you by then sort of have a feeling that the band was sort of slowly getting to that point of coming to the end?
Well, you push into the industry, right? You try to make a living out of it. You try to do the best you can, make as much money as possible. And at that point, we, as I said before, we were just beginning to realize that, we were sort of having a minimal impact on, mass culture somehow. I'm quoting Tom's lyrics at this point. But economically, it was very, very difficult because we were on tour for 6 to 7 to 8 months out of the year. And then to come back and have to make money to survive for the entire year.
Mm.
We'd come back with a, handful of cash, and that was great. We weren't losing money. But in 96, it was kind of, I guess it was 96. Anyway, we played a tour, and like the second gig or the third gig was in Norway, and we had all our merchandise confiscated by the Norwegian authorities. So like we had put up all this money. I mean, we always thought of ourselves as t-shirt salesmen anyway. So to have all your t-shirts taken away from you means you're not going to make any money. So we made less. We lost money on that tour, I believe.
Yeah.
And that was just like kind of like the last straw. I mean, we're always kind of like struggling to kind of keep it together and make the effort to like put the money out to make t-shirts and promote.
So why did the Norwegian authorities take umbrage to your t-shirts?
Oh, because we didn't claim them.
Right.
Yeah, they were sort of like in the boot. So, they confiscated it.
Right. Tricky.
I know.
So they were just being very efficient, really, weren't they?
Yes, they were.
Blimey, that's just a pain. So when you decided in 96 to say that's, to quote Jim Morris in the end, did you kind of all sit down and have the conversation, or did it just fade out even more?
Because of that event, because so demoralizing to do, I think it was a 6-week tour and not to have anything to show for it. Financially, it was too much of a hardship, and everybody kind of felt the same way at that point. There was nothing personal about anybody else.
Yes. That's fair enough.
And it just is like, okay. I mean, I would have kept going myself, but I, had my day job. So
Yes.
It was harder for other people.
You stuck with it. Then, so you kept your day job going, which is good. Sensible stuff. Then, no, it's always very important. But then you sort of, you get back together sort of 5 years later in 2001. Was that just the calling of rock and roll that sort of came knocking on your door?
No, that was me. That was me. I totally put the band back together.
Excellent.
I'll take credit for that. Just right after the band broke up, I moved to Brooklyn, and I moved specifically to be close to Steven. I was like, I want to be close to him so he can come over and play all the time. And then, because I didn't want to break up. I understood and accepted it, but I didn't want to stop playing music.
Yes.
So Steven and Sissy and I started playing together, and then we tried to put together a band for a few years. Worked up some material and auditioned singers, and then at one point Tom was just like, you know what, I feel like I enjoyed doing the music. The music business is not so great, but I want to do the music again. So he came back, and so it was the four of us for a bit, and we did maybe a show or two or something like that. And we did Three Sisters with just me on guitar. And then Dave came back to the band. So we were like basically back as like the original Alice Donut, or one of the original Alice Donuts.
Yes.
So it took a long time, right? 96 and then 2001 or 2002 is Three Sisters, something like that. 2000, early 2000s.
Well, it's interesting because at that time you sort of you brought out Three Sisters, then also you did Fuzz, and also 10 Glorious Animals came out sort of during the decade. So actually that's good. And you did a compilation, Freaks in Love, in 2011, which was quite nice. So does that mean that the band, did that just sort of, is it just kind of one of those, kind of a project now that sort of is still slightly happening in the background?
I would call it more of a concept than a project at this point.
Right. When was the last time the band either were in the studio or live?
Somebody paid to fly us to Switzerland to play a show.
Nice.
A few years ago. That was fun.
Excellent.
I think that's about 5 years ago now. So you see how time just like fucks with you, just like keeps passing.
Yes, absolutely.
Faster and faster. Yeah.
So it's because I know you did a show in, was it 2014 in France, and also 2017 in Baltimore, didn't you? Did you?
Oh, that was 2015 or 14 in France.
France was 14, Baltimore was 17.
Oh, right. Oh, I think it was Switzerland because we flew into Switzerland and drove to France. But you're right.
So when you said it's more of a, did you say concept at the moment? Is it the case that there's the occasional email, or is it just even less than that?
No, we like talk to each other, keep in touch, and like we always like, let's do it. It just hasn't come to fruition yet. No.
But in theory, there could be still new material, or even the odd show.
Absolutely. Yes.
Well, it's always good to know, isn't it? And did you also keep other musical kind of adventures going elsewhere, or was it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's Steve and Dave and I, who still live. We're the three donuts who still live in New York City. We've had a couple projects that have been around. We're going to be practicing on Wednesday.
Excellent.
In fact, yes.
The Donuts. So what do you call this lineup?
Right now, the lineup is Mustafana, and there's actually an album on Spotify, iTunes, blah, 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 dated 2014, I believe. We put the album out, And that band went on hiatus after that, and we had another band after that, but we haven't released anything.
Right.
But now we're back to Mustafana because they're the people who still live in New York City.
Nice one. Yes.
Yeah.
So,
It's a really good album. You should check it out.
I will. Once I learn how to spell the name of the band.
Sure. Mustafina. Mustafana.
Magic. Well, I will look at it. Yeah. So on that front, so that you've got that sort of project going, but generally, it's just keeping things just ticking over as they are, really, isn't it?
What do you mean?
Well, musically, there isn't sort of any more Alice Donut material coming out, is there?
Not at the moment, but no doors have been shut. Is basically how I would put that.
Yes, that's quite nice. I mean, anything can happen. I mean, if you were able to do, if there was anything you could have said to your, say, 16 or 18-year-old self starting out in that interesting, slightly murky world that is rock and roll, is there anything that in particular you would have just sort of wanted to sort of tell them?
Oh, absolutely. Like, don't just be like, I was totally like, I'm a guitar player. I'm like a musician. But there's so much more in the music world. And I wish I had told myself, like a friend of mine actually told me when I was 18 or so, he's like, dude, you should you're so the perfect person to be a recording engineer. I was like, yeah. I'm just a guitar player. It's all about like the art and stuff.
Yes.
And now I'm like, now that's what I am. But I was like, it took me until like 2000, like the year 2000 to realize that I was totally interested in that stuff. Meanwhile, I was just playing guitar and going to studios, but not really dipping my fingers into that. So I wish I'd.
So is it the case that you gave up the day job and became more of and managed to find a career in music?
No, the day job gave me up. I was in an industry that was decimated by the Madoff scandal. Like, all my whole revenue stream completely disappeared.
Oh,
I was not in finance, but I was doing work in not-for-profits, the not-for-profit sector.
Yeah.
And all the people who gave money to the not-for-profits were feeders to Madoff, basically, tax write-offs and stuff. So once that happened, they stopped hiring people like me to produce events and stuff like that.
Oh.
Yeah.
There you go. You got done.
Yeah.
That is murky, isn't it? That is a tragic moment, really, in anybody's life. So then what did you manage to sort of navigate to your next, chapter from that?
Yeah, right. So that was 2008, and I'd already been recording stuff for like 7 or 8 years. Like I started around like 2000, just kind of because that's when like the first FireWire interfaces came around.
Yes.
So I didn't go through the traditional route of like working at a studio, but like a lot of people at that time, and a lot of people to this day, are producing stuff with computers. And that was like the beginning. I remember we did some work with Bryce Goggin on an EP we did, the Big Ass EP, and it was like, well, it's kind of cool. But it didn't really hit me until I got my own interface. That all the stuff was pretty cool and pretty fun. So I've been learning that for 20 years. But it was only like the Madoff thing was 2008, so there was like this huge overlap. Like I was learning about equipment and stuff like that, and building up an arsenal of equipment until 2008. So by that time, I didn't need to invest money because I already had invested money in equipment. So it wasn't like a real jumping off a cliff to go into music production. Other than the fact that now everybody just produces themselves. So it was not a great business choice, but
yes,
I enjoy doing it. And working with a lot of different musicians is also pretty cool.
I would
as opposed
imagine.
to like a very specific group of musicians all the time.
How did you manage to navigate last year with the lockdowns and stuff like that?
My wife kept working. And other than just putting blinders on and praying that it ended, that's
That was it. Nice. Yeah. God, tricky one. Anyway, look, this has been amazing. Well, thank you ever so much for giving me the time for this. This has been...
Oh, yeah. Thank you. That's
brilliant. And if you want, I can always, when I do it, I can always send you the link and you can always use it elsewhere because I'm always kind of happy for that to happen. So
yeah, no, I definitely want to check out some of your older shows, especially the ones you mentioned earlier.
There are quite a lot, actually. It's a bit obsessive. But
yeah, the Oxbow one, especially David. Eugene,
oh God, yeah, the
really.
There was
and Magnuson as well.
Yes,
so there are plenty.
She was quite something actually. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, because we work with Kramer, so like, we know about Anne.
Oh my God, yes, yeah.
Yeah, so and Bongwater was definitely influential and definitely a big part of their scene at that time. So.
Well, I know there's a couple of their songs which were just absolutely mind blowing. Which I just remember John Peel playing them, and I think it was a track from the Big Sellout that I thought was just a stunning song. It has a very, I don't know, an echoey vocal on it, which I just think is stunning. Mm-hmm. But yes, Kramer. Tricky business.
Exactly.
Yeah, I know. And he also worked with Galaxy 500, which is not so traumatic, so that's quite handy. Though actually,
yeah, that was pre Bongwater, I guess, right? Or just.
Oh, yeah, I guess it was actually, yeah, because they were sort of around in the late 80s and early 90s, and then that split up as well. God, it always ends in tears, doesn't it? So never mind. Yes, 3 members of a band and 2 members are in a couple. That's a strong voting. There's strong voting rights on that.
Yeah, there's other dynamics, not just the voting thing, but then you have to. I mean, we had that too because Tom and Sissy were a couple towards the end. Had a family together, so it's it's hard not to bring your family stuff into a different family. Yes. It's like 2 intersecting families, which is very complicated.
I would imagine so, yes. There must have been interesting moments. But anyway, look, at least you're all happy and still friendly, so that's always a good thing. So, Excellent. Look, I'll let you get on, but thank you again for this. This has been amazing. And yes.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll keep in touch. Take care. Thanks a lot.
You too. Okay,
cheers.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And that was me in conversation with Michael Jung from Alice Donut. This has been the C86 show, David Eastaugh. If you want to contact me, you can on any of the social media platform sites. And all these interviews have been archived on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean. True. Have a great week. Stay safe.